Hello, everyone. Welcome to MLB Trade History Podcast. This is episode 6. I am one of your co-hosts, Scott Talber, and with me today is
Amir Malikpour.
So, to wrap up our Star Wars theme, Amir and I are dedicating podcast episode 6 to the Star Wars episode 6, which is Return of the Jedi. And for this, we are going to talk about a Jedi who left and came back eventually to his home planet of Boston, and that would be Curt Schilling. We're going to discuss a trade the Red Sox made to reacquire Curt Schilling with the Arizona Diamondbacks. You want to say anything about that, Amir?
Yeah, so I think we might also get into the fact that Curt Schilling may not necessarily be a perfect Jedi due to some of his character. As well as how he's been involved in a lot of trades that were not beneficial to the team that was letting him go, which is somewhat telling. But yeah, I mean, this was when he came back to the Red Sox. This was big. What happened that year was huge. It was like unprecedented, and and yeah, so we can go in and just talk about who was traded. And essentially, the Diamondbacks sent Schilling to the Red Sox for Mike Goss, who never played in the majors, Casey Fossum, Brandon Lyon, and Jorge De La Rosa.
Yeah, and I'm thinking those are two left-handed pitchers and one right-handed, right? Brandon Lyon was a right-handed pitcher.
Yeah, and a guy who cares? He never played.
Yeah.
No offense, Mike Goss.
Yeah, and Fossum was, he was highly touted in the Red Sox chain at some point too, including in that trade to Arizona. And I do recall that trade happening, and remember that Curt Schilling was kind of promising to bring a World Series back to Boston, the New England area, and it almost never happened too, right? They're down 3-0 to the Yankees, and Dave Roberts steals the base, and oh my gosh, it's like everything really turned around. So, and this is one of those Tim McCarver trivia things, but I believe at one point, maybe that year or afterwards, Arizona had 3 Brandons on the team, and Brandon Lyon was one of those 3. So, Tim McCarver trivia, right? But it is funny because it seems like the players Arizona did get in return for Schilling really didn't contribute a whole lot. Arizona definitely didn't win anything with those 4 players. And it's kind of like when the Phillies traded Schilling to Arizona, the guys they got back, Travis Lee and Vicente Padilla, and I believe Omar Dahl. Not okay. Vicente Padilla did okay, but yeah, there wasn't much return there. And I think there's been this knock on Curt Schilling that when his team isn't doing well, he is less motivated, and his ERAs have been okay, but they seem to spike up when he gets traded to a new team, and that team that he goes to seems to play a lot better. So,
yeah, I mean, Brandon Lyon, of the 4, at least for the Diamondbacks, Brandon Lyon ended up making the most impact. I mean, he was a closer for a while. In fact, I think they really banked on him to become a better player than what he really ended up being, and then he got injured. And Jorge De La Rosa is actually a pretty good pitcher now for the Rockies, but he ended up getting traded a bunch of times before selling and becoming a really good player with the Rockies.
And he may have had some injury issues too, at least with Colorado, I think. So, yeah.
But yeah, so it's
and Fossum was a big disappointment.
Oh
I mean, he just yeah.
And Mike Goss, well, he's in the minors.
We had to look him up for the purposes of this podcast. So
let me see how he did in the minors for Arizona.
Yeah.
He played until 2012. He left Arizona in 2000. But that year, that same year, Arizona let him go.
Right.
And
so he didn't even stick with the team.
No.
So.
He did not. He was actually an outfielder.
And
And yeah, he had actually subpar minor league stats, subpar A-ball stats. So
Yeah.
he's probably like just a throw-in.
Yeah, and Curt Schilling, another one. This is one of my favorite baseball trades of all time, and Amir and I alluded to this trade in an earlier podcast we did. The Glenn Davis from Houston to Baltimore Orioles for Steve Finley, Curt Schilling, and Pete Harnisch, and it's interesting because Glenn Davis did nothing with the Orioles. He made a bunch of money, I believe. I think that was he banked a lot of money. But of those three players that Houston got in return, Curt Schilling was really the last one to blossom. Pete Harnisch, I think, made one or two All-Star teams. And Steve Finley began to really blow up after a while before he was traded with Ken Caminiti to the Padres. And then Curt Schilling, his final season with Houston was as a long reliever, and he had a really good ERA, and he was traded to the Phillies, who made the World Series the year he was traded to them. So
he's been part of 3 World Series teams 3 different times, 2 winners.
2 winners, and also one World Series MVP with Randy Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
Even though Randy Johnson had 3 of the 4 wins, but yeah.
It's funny, like, so the year that he came to Boston, he won 21 games. He came in second to the Cy Young Award. Not sure who won the Cy Young that year. I could look it up. But I mean, he had great stats: 3.26 ERA, which was really good back then in the steroids era.
Yeah, especially in the AL too.
Now, Johan Santana won the Cy Young that year.
Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yep.
Minnesota, and so it's and basically Schilling became a hero with the blood on his socks.
The blood on the socks, or the ketchup on the socks, or the red marker on the socks. I don't know. Red Sox, right? It had to be blood.
Yeah.
So.
And then after that, they won the World Series again, right? But not with him.
Yeah, shame on me. I cannot remember if he was on that second of these recent 3 World Series winning teams. I want to say he was, but he wasn't much of a contributor. But I may be mistaken there. I know that he is really This kind of feels like a Curt Schilling show, right? He's actually an interesting guy. In this age where like athletes aren't outspoken, they're like it's the cliches. Curt Schilling is outspoken. I mean, he speaks his truth. He has the big Quest Tech thing with the strike, with the home plate umpire strike zone, and he is outspoken about his political beliefs. And he filed for bankruptcy a year ago, I think. All the money he lost from the video game failures, and interesting guy.
Yeah, he won the World Series with them too in 2007 as well.
Yeah, he probably wasn't much of a contributor, right? So, but he technically he got a ring. So,
yeah, it's kind of I don't know. He seems kind of like a guy that maybe I wouldn't be friends with. I don't know.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm just looking at his public persona. But
yeah,
he's a great pitcher, and every time he left the team, the new team that he went to, he did really well for them.
Yeah,
and I love him just for the fact that he's been part of so many awesome trades that are really cool that we can talk about.
I know. He's given us a lot of material for today and also for future episodes. At least maybe the Glenn Davis trade.
But I think the special thing about him, too, is like he was drafted by the Red Sox, as you alluded to earlier.
Right.
And he came back and he won the World Series that all those Red Sox fans had wanted for 100 years, over 100 years. And that's actually, it was less than 100 years.
Yeah.
Right, but
almost. The curse of the Bambino.
Yeah, and so he actually put the Bambino to rest. He exorcised the demons.
He did.
And that's actually really special. That's like Jedi coming back. So that's what he has in common with the Jedi.
Yeah, and he talked about later on in his career about how when he came up in the Red Sox chain that Roger Clemens was a mentor to him, and a lot of what he took with him on the mound and is stuff that he actually picked up from Roger Clemens. And initially when he told that story, I think it was to ESPN or something, he said what was it? Wade Boggs taught me everything about pitching.
Mm-hmm.
And the reporter said, Wade Boggs? You mean Roger Clemens? He said, oh yeah, I misremembered his name. Thank you. So, but Roger Clemens was his mentor coming up. And, you know, was it Mike Boddicker and Brady Anderson?
Yeah.
They were part of the from the Red Sox to the Orioles. Yeah.
I mean, that was like 1988. I'm really surprised that he would have ever met Roger Clemens.
Right. But, you know, knowing his attitude, like his kind of persona, even maybe as a youngster, you could see him kind of like, oh, I need to meet this guy. You know, I want to ask him for help, and
Maybe, yeah.
You know, or even if he just wanted an autograph or something, you know, so.
Well, Wade Boggs could have taught him about pitching, too, when he gave up some home runs to him.
Yeah, wasn't Wade Boggs, like, he was throwing, wasn't he a good knuckle? He could throw a knuckleball?
He might have pitched in the game, too. Yeah.
I know he ate chicken before all his games or something. I know about that, but another thing about Curt Schilling, which is, this is actually a touching thing. I don't know if you've heard this, Amir, but my understanding is that every home game, or maybe beyond that, road games too. So Curt Schilling's dad passed away when Curt Schilling, you know, wasn't too far into his career, or maybe even before. I don't remember, but or maybe in the beginning of his career as a baseball player, and you know, he left a ticket with an open seat, and that was like he saw his dad like sitting in, like a ghost of his dad would be sitting in that seat from, you know, coming from heaven. And it's actually a really touching thing. It's kind of refreshing again to hear an athlete kind of be kind of vulnerable like that, you know, when you around a bunch of jocks and stuff. But again, it's Curt Schilling. He's outspoken about his political beliefs against the umpires. You know, when he retired, he wrote that essay or something online and said, "This is why I am a Hall of Famer." Right? He wrote that. He's really outspoken. And I love that, as opposed to yeah, you know, one game at a time and all the other stuff and 110%, which is yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the polar opposite of A-Rod and so many others. And
I think he's also a real big, he was totally against, obviously, roiding. So he spoke out against people who
hated Barry Bonds, right? Big time. Yeah.
And what's interesting, I mean, going back to his dad thing, that is pretty touching, but like, I'd get distracted if like I'm pitching and then like I see somebody sitting on my dad's seat. It's like, oh, what the hell? Who's a jerk sitting on my dad's seat?
There's a guy sitting there. Don't you see him? No, I don't. Yeah.
That's not my dad. It's a different guy's ghost.
That's not your dad. That's your uncle.
Oh. Your dad wasn't really into baseball as much.
That's not the ghost of your dad. That's the ghost of Roger Clemens' Hall of Fame dreams. Yeah.
Or is that the goat that, was it a goat? Oh, the goat is the Cubs one.
That's the Cubs, yeah.
That's Babe Ruth.
Yeah. And, you know, it's, I don't know, Curt Schilling, really interesting guy, and I felt bad when I heard about his bankruptcy. I mean, he's kind of a guy that's easy to dislike in many ways, too, because of the Red Sox thing, and because, you know, it's funny because we could praise him for being outspoken, but it's also a reason like people would, you know, put him down and not like him for being outspoken. It's like you just can't win sometimes, you know. So it's just it's a shame. And you know, I don't know about you. I'd love your opinion on this, Amir. I group about 4 or 5 pitchers in the same category. And this is based on lifetime starting pitching stats and also postseason stats. Curt Schilling, Jack Morris, John Smoltz, and there's one other guy that I'm blanking on now. But they're kind of like in that same mold, you know, like 200 wins kind of, and 3 ERAs, like not quite Hall of Fame, but kind of the notch below for starting pitchers. Great resume in the postseason. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. I definitely agree with you. They're all in the same category.
Yeah.
If I had to rank them, just not looking at stats or anything, I would say Smoltz is probably the surefire Hall of Famer. I don't know if he is a Hall of Famer, but...
No, I mean he may be eligible next season.
So Smoltz, I would say number 1, and then I'd even go as far as saying that Schilling is probably higher than Jack Morris, even though Jack Morris, because Schilling just has been in the playoffs a lot more.
Right.
But definitely, like, in terms of composite, like, Baseball Reference has this thing where, like, players who are most similar,
right.
I think they'd always come up with those. I think you're right.
Do they kind of group them together?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I don't know, but I would say, actually, I have that up right now. I can look up who they grouped them with.
But don't forget, Jack Morris won the World Series with the Tigers, the Twins, and the Blue Jays.
Oh my God, I forgot
he played
about
that
the
one
Blue
season
Jays.
with Minnesota.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I mean, and we talked about Curt Schilling. Kind of, he was been with multiple teams, but 2 of those teams did not win the World Series.
That's true. That's right. Yeah. So.
Or I mean, one didn't. The Arizona and Boston did. The Phillies didn't in '93 against the Blue Jays.
Yeah, I totally forgot about the Blue Jays.
Yeah.
And Jack Morris by that time was not that good a pitcher, but.
Right.
But no, you're right. He won 3 World Series. I did not remember that.
And he's also the winningest pitcher in the '80s, I believe. If you like, some people like that argument about your era. In your era, you were the greatest or something. Now, I think Mark Grace had the most hits in the '90s, but he's definitely not a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
But and plus the wins stat is it's not as important today as it once was. So.
I think actually, what's funny is like they actually do group Smoltz. He's in the top 10 grouping as the same as Schilling.
Okay.
Number 1 is Kevin Brown. 2 is Bob Welch. 3 is Oral Hershiser.
Okay.
And then they have Tim Hudson, Freddie Fitzsimmons, Milt Pappas, John Drysdale.
Surprising.
I'm surprised. Yeah, Bartolo Colon and Dazzy Vance. What a name.
Bartolo Colon. He was the subject of one of our podcasts, folks.
That's right.
Yeah.
Go back and check it out.
And by the way, guys, we're going to wrap up in a few minutes here, but Amir and I have decided to put these same podcasts on our own YouTube channel. And, right now we have one of the podcasts up, but at some point they will all be up. And, if you happen to catch those on YouTube, there is a subtle difference, which isn't that subtle because of the editing process, but YouTube has the music copyright issue. So we would try to upload the audio from the original podcast, and YouTube has the copyright reading, the music and all that. The content that Amir and I share is the same. It's just the beginning and end music is not on there, but the rest of it, the meat, is still there.
The part you guys tune in for.
Yeah, there you go. You're not, if you're looking for the AJ Pierzynski Twins Giants trade. You're not there for AJ Scratch by Curtis Blow. You're there for Amir's and my analysis on that trade. So anyway, look for that. Just go on YouTube.com and just do a general search for MLB Trade History Podcast. So anything else, Amir, to wrap up the Curt Schilling?
No, thanks
our
for
trilogy here.
Thanks for doing it. This is actually really fun.
Yeah.
We're both big Star Wars fans, and it's the end of the trilogy.
Yeah.
Hopefully the prequels will come. I don't know. Maybe the prequels will. It took a while for us to come up with the 6th episode, but the prequels might take a little bit longer. We'll probably divert and do some other topics. Yeah,
it may be impossible to work in who was it, Chris Gwynn, that was his brother, but Tony Gwynn Jr. or Pete Rose Jr. or something. They didn't really do much, but. I'm sure we'll figure something else out, or maybe we'll even do a theme not related to Star Wars or something. So, either way, we will be back with more MLB Trade History podcasts. So, thank you for listening, guys. Thank you, Amir.
Thanks, Scott.
And we'll see you soon. All right, bye everyone.